Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Ecoffee with Experts. I'm your host, Matt Fraser. And today on the show, I have with me a very special guest, Michael Sloan. Now, Michael is the founder and CEO of the Macallan Group, a healthcare-based marketing, media, and consulting company. In his role, he oversees business development, strategic partnerships, creative department, marketing strategy, training, and finance. With offices in Hoboken, New Jersey, Jacksonville, Florida, and Phoenix, Arizona, the Mcallen Group is a market leader in helping health systems, pharmaceutical companies, medical device companies, and medical practices adapt to current market conditions and growing their business. Mike, thanks so much for being on the show. It's great to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt.
Yeah, awesome. So, hey, Mike, what made you want to become an entrepreneur?
You know, I kind of do remember a little bit of a trigger point. When I was like a senior in high school. It was kind of funny. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, as no 18-year-old does. I had a friend bring me to like a multi-level marketing seminar kind of thing. And it didn't really do anything, but they gave me a few books to read. And I was not a reader up at that point. It was actually, they gave me Rich Dad, Poor Dad and How to Make Friends and Influence People. And yeah, I had no really experiences or people around me growing up that were kind of entrepreneurs, but I read those books and I really liked it. And I just kind of dove into that and I started reading, and all throughout college, I carried that out. And more later in my college years, I started really thinking about what I was going to do. And I started a company in college, and the rest was history. I just kind of, at a certain point, I was just like, I didn't want to work for somebody else. And I was fortunate enough to start and run a successful company in college, and never really looked back.
Hey, that's awesome. And what I can think of no two greater books to kindle the entrepreneurial spirit in someone than those two books. I read those books probably a long time ago as well. They're just, I think I've read them both twice, maybe. So those are just awesome books. Do you think there's anything that can prepare someone for becoming an entrepreneur?
It's tough. I think there are certain people who are more adept to it and are going to have better time. Listen, at the end of the day, I think every entrepreneur has to be a bit of a salesperson. You have to sell a product, a service yourself in some capacity. And you know, it's an uncomfortable process for a lot of people. But it's interesting. I mean, you see a lot of very successful entrepreneurs who would not consider themselves salesperson, but they're very knowledgeable about their industry, their subject matter, and so on. And they inevitably become a good salesperson. But I think most small businesses, you kind of have to wear that hat a lot in the beginning. You know, I think there's a lot of things with just mental fortitude and being able to deal with the pressures and risks that inevitably arise. So I think that those are key variables in the equation outside of just like, what is my product? What is my service? And what am I actually going to execute on? But there's those ancillary traits that I think are important. You know, there's a lot of people who are very smart, very talented, very good at what they do, who just probably can't handle the sales or the mental aspect of it, or the risk. You know, the risks are high.
The risks are high. Would you say that, you know, learning someone, if they want to be an entrepreneur, they should probably learn how to sell and maybe take a sales position before?
I think that's valuable. You know, I look at my own life, right? Like, I don't consider myself a salesman, but I think just interacting with people, I think you need to have communication skills. And it could be as simple as like growing up, I always like waitered and bartended and stuff like that, where you're just communicating with people. It's not necessarily a sales role, but you need to be able to connect with people. It's hard to go into business without having that dynamic in some capacity. So learning those basic kind of skill sets are certainly going to be valuable, and not just for an entrepreneur, for anybody. You know, I think, you know, I work with and hire a lot of younger kids out of college and stuff. And it's interesting how many people, struggle with some of that stuff. People are stuck behind computer screens most of their lives. And, it's a dying skill set.
Yeah. It's interesting. The newer generation and those skills that you and I maybe take for granted, or I didn't always have them. I went and worked like you. I worked in restaurants, and that restaurants helped me tremendously to learn how to talk to people. And it got to the point where you could read what kind of person, you probably tell me if this is true, you could read what kind of person you were dealing with as a customer within the first 10 to 30 seconds, just looking at the way they sat down at the table. You knew how to approach them, to ask what kind of drink they wanted, or how to just your body, how to approach them, whether you're going to approach them with 100%, or whether you're going to approach them like very professional, because you can tell they mean no business. They're not in the mood for joking just by the look on their face.
It's kind of profiling a little bit, to your point. Yeah. Like, what are they dressed at? Are they in formal business attire? Are they going to be drinking a fancy scotch? Or are they going to, are they there for a football game? Are they going to drink a Coors Light? Like all those things are very relevant in that capacity, but also in the business world. You can tell a lot of about somebody, about how they carry themselves, how they dress, how they speak. And it's important to pick up on those nodes.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would recommend personally, people go work in a restaurant. You'll never, even if you do it for a year, you'll learn skills that will be with you for the rest of your life. Multitasking, being able to think quick, confrontation when stuff goes wrong.
Yeah. It's funny, when you think about like raising children and stuff, I always say that like they got to read some of those books and work in restaurants and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. It builds somewhat of just as good of a foundation, I think, as much that you learn in school.
Yeah, all for sure. I'd say so. So what advice would you give to entrepreneurs who are just starting out? Like someone came to you and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting a business," or a client came to you and said, "Hey, I'm just thinking about starting this idea, starting this business. I'm looking for some marketing services, but I'm just thinking of starting it." And what advice would you give them?
I think the number one thing, and listen, in an ideal situation, you are starting a company already with clients or with some kind of revenue planned out. So that way you're opening up and you're hitting the ground running, as opposed to having to burn a lot of cash in order to build up. I think that would be, the ideal situation. I see a lot of people who work for a big company, they develop relationships with clients or whatever. They have a new idea that's a spinoff of what they're currently doing. And they're able to, start with a few clients and at least get that cash flow going. Because I think cash flow is one of the most important things. Most people underestimate what their costs are going to be. And then they're put in a situation where they need to take out loans, refinance their home, or really just put themselves in a very uncomfortable situation. So I think that would be first and foremost is addressing all of that. Get cash flow, get clients, and overestimate. I think people are too they're too optimistic about what is going to happen in the 2, 3 to 6 months to 12 months after they open. I think they should err on the side of conservative and really adjust their pro formas and their expectations to what if things don't go the way I have planned out? Like, what is my capacity for failure? What is the at what point, if things don't work out the way I want, at what point do we say this is not going to work?
Call it a day.
People are just overly optimistic, and quite frankly, it's the entrepreneurship stuff is very glorified these days. It's good and it's bad. It's it's kind of on a pedestal, and it's not for everybody. But I think that if you have the right plan and understand the cash flow side of it, anything's achievable.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like, for instance, you talk about preparing for and underestimating. I think a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of people, myself included, you just, in order to be an entrepreneur, you got to be optimistic. You got to be thick-skinned. some of the things you talked about. And that's a very valid point that you brought up. For instance, how many people did the pandemic shake? I bet there's various businesses that some have succeeded. A world calamity has caused them to be successful. Let's be frank there. And some businesses have just absolutely had to close their doors.
Yeah. And that's so hard to predict, right? I mean, you have to prepare for all foreseeable issues and market trends and stuff like that. Obviously coronavirus and stuff was just completely unpredictable.
Totally.
But you're right. And there are people I know that went to the restaurant industry right before it and got slammed. And then there are some other industries, like I'm heavy in healthcare. So we didn't really skip a beat, fortunately.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, not everybody was as fortunate.
Yeah. So I guess prepare for the worst and hope for the best, and have some cash.
100%. I think you have to have the contingency plan and be real about whether if things don't work out 100% the way you want, are you relying on this ideal situation to get you to wherever you want to be? Or if you only hit like 70% of your initial goals, are you still going to be okay? If you hit 60%, are you going to be okay? If you hit 40%, you're going to go bankrupt. That might be something you got to figure out. Maybe get some lines of credit, get some additional cash flow, do something, but you got to figure that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, what are some hard choices you've had to make to get where you are today?
Well, I think the first challenging decision, I dropped out of college because I started a company in college and we were doing very well. I had 2 classes left, but our business was too busy. So I was like, I'll do this at some other point, and it just continued to grow and I never went back. So that was kind of a challenging decision at the time. I don't know if there's any large ones, but I think just small ones along the way, just personal sacrifices. I think for the first for the first 2 years of my current company, I didn't pay myself anything. I was living on nothing, just shoestrings. And then, just working 60, 70, 80 hours a week for many years without taking a break. That takes a toll on you.
It does, doesn't it? But hey,
for sure,
success. I think a lot of people see these quote unquote overnight successes, or the let's be frank, the Mark Zuckerberg story and the other, these startups that, for instance, there's a startup in my city that's worth $1 billion and is one of only 2 Canadian companies that's worth $1 billion. And,
no kidding.
Sure, he had a great idea. It's Get Jobber, just for a reference, people are wondering. Get Jobber, it's a service-based scheduling software for people in the trades and services industry. But that sure, he had a great idea and he brought that idea to market, and he's made money, but that doesn't happen. I mean, how many success stories how many are there? I mean, I don't know what the statistic is for how many people go broke and how many businesses go out of business within the first 5 years, but it's quite high. So
yeah, it's got to be high. And I have to imagine those statistics are changing a little bit because there are so many business opportunities now that really don't take a lot of capital. There's, so many little things you can sell online. You hear all these things about people just selling random products on Amazon, Etsy, stuff like that, where their success rate is probably pretty high because you can continue to run that thing forever. You got a little store, you got an LLC, and even if you're making a couple $100 a month, you're not technically going bankrupt. Whereas I think where you see a lot of those statistics, it comes from the 70s, 80s, 90s, where you're talking about big capital injection and infrastructure and stuff like that, where you can't operate without having good cash flow. So I would be interested to see what those statistics are today. I think that the success rate is higher, or at least the lack of default rate is lower. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting how the barrier to entry, the internet, in some ways has made the barrier to entry to entrepreneurship lower.
For sure, 100%.
You still need an idea. You still need self-discipline. You still need knowledge and all those things. Do you have, like, for instance, this is a kind of personal question, but what is your biggest failure that you've encountered, and how did you pick up from it, if any?
So, I mean, there's been lots of little mistakes. Every day we make mistakes. Yeah. But I think there have been a few situations where we have tried starting up a company or a spinoff or something like that. And we were bringing in people that were either hired employee. All right. So I'm not a software engineer, right? I'm not a developer. Okay. I know the basics, but not my core skill set. So for example, one company, we were trying to build like a SaaS model, right? Yeah. And we were just hiring the developers. It was hired guns to do it. And we spent a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of energy. We loved the product. But we got to a point where the development team couldn't execute what we needed to do. We went way over costs. We ended up scrapping the project and, dumping a lot of money into it. And at the end of it, I was just like, this sucks, being in a position where I can't go in and fix it. In my current, organization, I can go in, if something needs to happen, I can pull an all-nighter and fix any problem. And I've, always had that mentality where I'll just do it. If it needs to get done, I'll make sure it gets done. But when it got to a point where it was like the technical situation where I physically couldn't do it, I couldn't spend all night working on something, I was relying on other people. That was a struggle, and something that I vowed I won't do again. I won't put myself in a position where I don't have really a developer partner or somebody who I can really trust to do those things in order to be successful in a venture. So that would be one, painful learning lesson that I've had, is try not to do something that you can't fix yourself.
Yeah. That you don't have the primary skill set for.
Yeah.
Now, would you, if you were to do something like that again, would you partner with a developer?
Yeah, 100%. I would make sure that they're putting in the sweat equity and not just looking at it as a paycheck. Yeah. And everything else is aligned with goals, objectives, and a true partnership, not just a gun for hire.
Yeah. Because nobody really cares about something as much as if they have skin in the game. They just don't.
Well, you have to, and you have to look at it. You have completely conflicting objectives. If it's just a gun for hire, they're almost incentivized to let it drag out a little bit, and for there to be change orders, and for there to, where you're trying to do it as lean and mean as possible as the owner. The developers, if they're just looking at it from a paycheck perspective, have the complete opposite incentive. They want it to drag out as long as possible. And I think that's the inherent issue. Yeah,
that's a very good perspective I never thought about that really. That's exactly what it's about. They want it to drag it.
Yeah. If they don't have another project lined up, then they're like, oh shoot, I'm going to be out of work after this. So they're going to drag it on.
Exactly. I better drag this out so I can buy some bacon.
Yeah.
Or bring home the bacon. So was it in 2011 that you founded the Macallen Group?
Yeah, it was like November 2011, just going into 2012.
So how did that happen?
Yeah. So it was a little serendipitous. So my founding partner and I, we actually went to high school together. We knew each other. We weren't really good friends, but we knew of each other. We were in different grades and stuff, but I ran into him at a mutual friend's party, and we were both in a very similar position. I had started my first company, and I wasn't getting along with my partner at that time. And he had started another company. He wasn't getting along with his partner. And we were just at this kind of mutual friends party, and we just were just talking shop, talking business all night, at like a campfire. And it was just, we were up till like 3 a.m, just talking business. And by the end of it, we were just like, we got to do something together. We're very like-minded. We were both going through a similar situation. And over the next 6 months or so, we kept in close contact, kept spitballing ideas on what we could do. And we both kind of had left our previous businesses around the same time. And we started the Mcallen Group.
Oh, right on. My apologies. So what are some general tips you could give for people for effectively running a marketing agency, as you've been doing for 11 years now?
I think, it's important to be introspective and know what you're really good at. I think that there's a lot of, when it comes to like marketing agencies, there's so many out there these days, and everybody tries to do everything. And we made this mistake for sure in the beginning of trying to do everything and realizing you're confident in one area and, not so great in another area. And, kind of had those ebbs and flows of skill sets. And at the end of the day, it would piss off clients, in some capacity in those areas where we weren't very strong and so on. So I think it's important to know what you're good at, know what you're not good at, and the areas you're not good at, either internally work to improve that or develop strategic partnerships with other people who are good at that. That has been our kind of recipe, is just really understanding what we're good at and then finding the right partner agencies or individuals who are very good in the areas we're not good at, and then rounding out our skill sets.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to be. I mean, there's so many facets of digital marketing in general. Forget about just digital. There's marketing from copywriting to analytics to it's impossible for one person.
Yeah, it's extremely impossible. And listen, nobody's good at everything. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it's hard to find, the superstars. There's a lot of people who are mediocre at things. It's easy. There's so many resources out there. There's so many, areas you can get educated on various aspects of marketing, whether it's copywriting, design, running ads. And you really can become very proficient in a lot of these skill sets in not a lot of time in the big scheme of things. But one, if you're taking on a lot of clients, you can't do it yourself. You're inevitably going to have to bring on additional help. And two, it's just important for people to, I think, really get to be at a very high level in what they're doing. You don't want to be known as the group that's mediocre.
No, not at all. So what do you look for then in when you come across a situation where it's like, okay, this client wants this, we're not so good at, what do you look for when trying to find either number one, an employee, a contractor, or a vendor as a partner?
Yeah, I mean, so when there's situations when I have a client identify we're not the best fit for them. I know who the good fits are. I've been around long enough to know who those agencies are. I pass them off. I don't. Yeah, 100%. I think everything comes around. So for example, we don't really do PR. It's something that I've tried to internalize at a few points in times. Just same thing. We were okay at it. And I know a few really good PR agencies. So, in those instances, I'll just say, this is not our bread and butter. If you need video, if you need websites, you need XYZ, we'll be glad to help you. But I recommend you go with these guys. And, they've referred us business in the same capacity. I think everything comes around. I think if you're not greedy, you're going to be okay. It's at the end of the day, it's a small world. It's a small industry. People are always, you see the same people over and over again. And I think it's nice to play well in the sandbox. For example, I have our office in Arizona is, a few people who had worked for a competitor agency, and we were always friendly with them, always saw them at events and knew them in the industry and respected their work and collaborated on clients with them. And, they got hit pretty bad during COVID and they kind of joined our team. So there's always opportunities like that happen. I think it's always good to look at the long picture. And, it's like the old adage, it takes a lifetime to build a reputation, but 2 seconds to destroy it. So if you're kind of doing things that are promising clients things you can't deliver on, or just doing malicious things in a competitive manner to people who are also in the industry, it's going to come back to bite you. I think that clients are more trusting when you're very upfront with them and say, hey, this is not our core competency. And it's never come back to bite us. It's always come back to benefit us in the long run, having those conversations.
That's awesome. It reminds me of the book you mentioned earlier, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki's book, where he said anytime he needed an opportunity to open up, he gave money away. And something happened. I don't know if you remember that story.
Yeah.
It's like, he's always be willing to give. So, give a referral without any strings attached, and it's come back to benefit you. You had mentioned a key thing there, a client. Like, how do you determine? Do you have a process for determining whether a client's a good fit?
Yeah, I mean, there are certain financial commitments that we need for engagement. And I think like in the agency world, I find there's kind of like 3 different tiers, right? You have your entry level tier where you have agencies selling the like $2,000 to $10,000 packages. It's a lot of automations. It's kind of a lot of streamlined stuff. It's more of a high volume, low margin model. You have your middle tier, which is in the like people are charging 10 to 50 grand a month, who are a little bit more boutique-y and so on. Then you have your like Madison Ave agencies, which are, representing Coke and Nike and stuff like that. Yeah. So we know where we fall. We're more in that middle boutique-y, somewhat industry specific type niche model, where there are people who just like, we have a certain threshold on, we won't engage with them because I can't allocate the resources in order for the client to be successful. So I'll pass those off to some of those people who I know take on those types of clients. When I'm out having conversations with potential clients, I'm always listening to what their pain points are, how they have engaged with previous agencies and stuff like that. There's certainly a lot of red flags to look out for. I think people who talk bad about other agencies and so on and how they do it and what they're saying. I think a lot of problems in the agency world and why a lot of people suffer with high attrition rate is they're overselling and under delivering, right? Yeah. They're, and I think that's a huge problem. I talk with people who say like, oh, this guy told me I could do, for this price, I can do this. And for this price, I can do this. And I kind of approach it very oppositely. I come in with very low expectations. I tell them, I try and tell them like, for this price, this is what you should expect. We're going to shoot for this, but realistically, this is where our barometer should be. So when we do, I often think we can achieve better results than what I'm telling them. They're blown away. So I may lose a few bids because of that, but we never lose clients because it's all about managing expectations. And, I think I'm very good at making sure they know exactly what we're doing, how money's being allocated and what they should really expect at different points in time. And we're very good at surpassing that. So and that's where, we talked earlier about, being a salesman and stuff like that. I've hired salesmen and sometimes the problem you get into is salesmen are just focused on sales and don't have sometimes the operational side of it. And they're over promising just so they meet their sales quota or something like that.
Just so they can get their commission.
Yeah. And I think that brings about a lot of issues. And ultimately the client is left with a subpar product and they're not being, the delivery is not what was being sold. And people talk, eventually that client is going to talk to other people in the industry. And the word's going to get around very quickly.
Especially with social media and Google reviews and everything. So besides a potential client bad mouthing a previous agency or maybe being boisterous about themselves, are there any other red flags that you look out for?
I think that there are clients we've certainly worked with and spoken to who really don't take criticism well or don't listen to advice. there are kind of exercises I'll do in some of those initial conversations to kind of gauge their feedback as to whether or not they would be open to certain changes or certain things. And I think if you get some heavy pushback on something that should be pretty trivial, it's a little bit of a red flag. I often kind of try and get an understanding of how frequently they want communication, how frequently they want to do meetings and updates and stuff like that. And I've had people say, I want daily updates and stuff like that, which is fine, but there's a price and and that comes with that. Yeah, it's a lot of manpower, and they don't want to pay for it. So it takes time, but I think it's just a matter of like, after a few conversations, it's pretty apparent whether or not their budget allocation matches their expectations. I mean, because listen, if there was an unlimited budget that they had allocated to something, you can usually meet their expectations. But if there's just unrealistic, hey, this is my budget and this is what I'm expecting, at that point, usually I'll just pass it off.
Yeah. They're wanting a filet mignon, but they only have enough money to pay for ground beef.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how do you politely decline working with those clients? Any tips or strategies for that without damaging the relationship?
Yeah. I refer them to another agency. I'll just say, this is not the right fit for us. I think that these guys will be better suited for you. That's my main one. I try and help them in as much as possible. I just know that we may not want to deal with them, but somebody else will. So I'll usually just kind of refer them out.
That's great. Switching it up to, for instance, I know you use video production in your business. Can you expand a little bit on how you use that as a tool for marketing your agency? How you effectively use it?
Yeah. So I love using video. For a lot of marketing, not just like on ads and stuff like that. We don't do a lot of ads. What I more use it for, I think that the sales process for an agency it's very challenging for clients to differentiate one agency from another. They have meetings and they're interviewing people and they're like, let's say they're looking for SEO services and they're like, everybody says, oh, I'll get you to page one. I'll do this. I'm going to do the content creation and we're going to do the backlinking. We're going to do the distribution. We're going to, fix all your on-page issues. And they have the same conversation over and over again. They may even have a very detailed RFP and they get the proposals and the numbers are all over the place. Right. And they just can't grasp it. They're like, why are these numbers so all over the place? I don't want to go to the lowest guy. I don't want to go to the highest guy. Maybe I'll go in the middle. And a lot of these people have buyer's remorse. I talk with clients all the time who are just like, oh, I had a bad situation here. I had a bad situation here. Every agency has heard this of clients who have had bad relationships in the past. And it's hard for them. It's even hard for me. It's hard for, I think, people in the industry to understand exactly what somebody is doing behind the scenes. Are they really good at what they're doing behind the scenes? And when you put together, for somebody to put together a proposal that just has numbers and stuff like that, it's easy to also make the numbers look good. And the reason I love video is because it's very tangible. It's very easy for people to look at it and be like, oh, this looks awesome. Like, let's give these guys a try. It's very easily shareable. In organizations where there are multiple decision makers, you may sit down with one or even all of them, but when you leave that room, they're not retaining the majority of what you said. It's kind of in one ear, out the other. Do they like you? Do they like your personality? Oftentimes decisions get made on, do I like the person and is their price point good? So the video aspect of it, I love because I'll text it to the client, be like, hey, share this with your partners, check it out. Here's what we did with somebody, a very similar business to you. And that closes more deals than anything. And it allows us to really make sure what we're trying to convey doesn't get diluted in that transfer of information from, one decision maker talking to another and so on. So it's great from that perspective. It's easy to see, it's easy to tell, okay, this is quality, and this is what we want. And it's easy. We have enough case studies and relevant pieces of work where I have a good video for many different scenarios that I can just send out. And I love just texting it to people like, hey, check this out. And they're like, oh, that was awesome. And then it's a great foot in the door, when it comes to like upselling, like what I'm looking for is I want to get my foot in the door. I want to develop a relationship, start to work with you, hire us for a video shoot, and then we'll work to upsell them and grow that relationship. And many of our larger clients started with like a one-off video shoot because they saw one of our videos, they thought it looked good. And then we started rolling up into taking over all their digital needs.
So you're using video in the sales process for instance, are you using videos of like a video recording of you going through the proposal, or a video of a case study of what you did previous, or a previous previous video that you did for a client?
Yeah, it's usually the latter. It's usually like video deliverables we created for other clients. They're relevant to that person I'm pitching, to say like, here's how we did this branded video. This is how we created this ad for this client. It's usually just like actual deliverables we had for other clients, using that to show them like, listen, this is the quality work. This is what we can do. We stand by it, and we can do this for you. And that's usually the easiest way to get our foot in the door.
Wow. So videos is basically your foot in the door strategy.
Yeah, I think there's two ways, right?
One of them anyway.
There's word of mouth where an existing client or somebody I know is recommending us, and that may take a different direction. But for like clients that don't know of our company and don't know me personally or anybody within our organization, the videos are absolutely the best way for us to at least get the meeting, sit at the table, submit a proposal, and get our foot in the door.
Hey, that's pretty good. So what type of video content has been most successful? Just the in attracting new clients. Is it the case studies only, or do you make videos about your services?
Not a ton. I mean, we have like 2 or 3 branded videos that talk about our services, and they're fine. Yeah. Honestly, we created them like 2 years ago. I need to update it, but those I find aren't as convincing as showing clients like, all right, so we work a lot in healthcare, right? We work with hospitals, pharmaceutical, medical device companies. And so we just did a project for a medical device company where we took like 3D, they do spine implants, right?
Okay.
So we took their implants, they sent us the 3D renderings, we animated it, made this really cool video, used it on their website and stuff like that. So I started showing that to other medical device companies, and I know it's better than what they have on their site and in their media libraries. So I'm showing them, hey, look what we did over here. And they're like, oh crap, we need this. This looks awesome. Yeah. And now we're starting to have conversations with many of their competitors. So I think that strikes a chord with people more than anything, is showing them, hey, look what your competition's doing. Look what we did over here. We can do this for you, and we can do it better, and so on. So those are, I think, the easiest conversations, particularly if it's like a cold opener. If it's somebody that we don't know and haven't been introduced before, that works very well for us.
Hey, that makes a lot of sense. So what advice would you give to another agency owner who's considering using video like this to attract new clients?
I think, well, you need to get your feet wet somewhere, right? I think you need to have a good product, in just like anything we were saying before, some people are mediocre at it and other people are exceptional at it. I think you gotta have the quality in order for this to be effective. So I would start there. find, and there's so many resources out there, between, Upwork and some of those freelancers to find good editors, find good directors of photography, and produce some good content, do it at cost initially, get a good portfolio.
Yeah.
And then once you have that portfolio, then it becomes much easier to really start showcasing it and spreading it around and just got to figure out how to get it into the right people's hands.
That's a good tip. Doing it at cost, to get the portfolio. That's great advice for anybody wanting to do any service, whether it's web design or video production, or if you don't have a portfolio, do things at cost for people.
Yeah, 100%. And it's a good pitch too, to even go into new clients. And listen, like being open and honest, especially if you're going after like smaller market clients, if you're going after like the mom and pop shops, the smaller businesses who don't have big budgets, it's easy to go in and say, hey, I'm a new agency. I'm just starting up. This is what I can do. Let me just help you out here. I mean, like, it's you should be able to knock down a few of those projects.
Absolutely. Saying you're new, you don't have to pretend to be something you're not, and you may have the skill sets, but you just need an opportunity to like prove yourself. And the best way to do that is to do it at cost.
Yeah, 100%.
So you had mentioned that you use the videos to, engage and start the relationship. And then from there, you've gone on to do other services. Do you have any tips for like cross-selling and upselling from the video?
I mean, what we've been very good at, I think, is looking for additional revenue opportunities, and really sinking our teeth into clients and becoming irreplaceable. I think it's important for agencies is how do you become unfireable? So what we learned, over the years was a lot of clients, like I said, we're big in the healthcare space. So a lot of hospitals and large groups, we work largely in like with big orthopedic and spine and neurosurgery groups, musculoskeletal space. So a lot of these organizations have been doing marketing, and like I said, they had bad tastes in their mouth from previous engagements, and spent all this money and it didn't work, and blah blah blah. And what we found was that it often wasn't a problem necessarily of their marketing strategies and initiatives. It was usually an operational issue. They didn't have the right technologies in place to track things. They didn't have the right people in place. You go into a hospital or a medical practice, the person sitting at the front desk or the person answering the phone has never had a day of customer support training. They probably never worked at a restaurant and really had to deal with those, interpersonal things. So, when Susie is very nice to the doctor who's her boss, when he comes in the door, that's fine. But when you actually hear her on the phone and you record those phone calls, you realize she doesn't know what she's saying and what she's doing and so on. So what we started doing was a lot of kind of consulting and just basic customer service training and staying on top of their intake team and helping them even hire those types of individuals and becoming a little bit more of a consulting manager level service for our client. So we started doing that a number of years ago, and that's been extremely beneficial for us. It's an additional revenue stream, and it makes us a very integral part of their organizations, where it would be very difficult for them to replace us in many instances. So like things like that is how we're kind of upselling and cross-selling, adding additional services like call tracking and CRM tools and all that kind of stuff. We implement it. Makes us sticky. We make a little bit of a margin on it. It's recurring revenue. It's simple stuff. So we're always looking to, once we get our foot in the door, how do we improve this? How do we scale the scope of our services? What can we execute on? And, we like to become very knowledgeable of our clients and their businesses. And once again, we're not a high volume, low margin. We're a little bit more low volume, higher margin. So we can allocate the resources and the time needed to do that. So it's that's just our model. It's what works for us. And that's why this strategy, I think, is effective for people who do have those types of models.
Well, absolutely. You mentioned how before you you and your partner had a previous businesses that you had the wrong partner. Mm. And so what are some things that you would recommend people look for when choosing the right potential business partner?
Yeah, it's challenging, right? I think that you have to look at, like, what is your real objective when starting this business? Is it like, I just want to, make a certain amount of money? Do you want to, is there an exit strategy? Are you looking for a lifestyle? Are you looking for, like, I think it's very important to lay that all out on the table, and really understand, okay, like, how much time are we putting into this? What other engagements do you have going on? Is this your, like, sole focus of your life right now? Mm-hmm. What are their just, like, kind of ethics, just making sure that you guys stand on the same page when it comes to business decisions. I think it's very important to outline roles and responsibilities and hold each other accountable. In the past, when we hadn't detailed specific roles and responsibilities, you get a lot of finger pointing. Oh, you didn't do this. I did this. Well, it's like, that was, what you were responsible for. Okay, this is what I'm responsible for. Mm-hmm. And I think if you have the right vision, the right exit strategy, or the right understanding of what to do with finances when they come in, like, do you want to reinvest in the business? Do you want to pull it out and pay yourself? Do you want to,
hire new staff,
invest in something else, hire staff? Exactly. Right. So those are very important conversations to have, because they're all big areas of conflict.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. If you don't have the discussion beforehand, how are you going to know? So how do you know when it's the right time to end the partnership? Like, how did you know when it was time to do that with your previous?
Yeah. I mean, I've up to this point had several companies that we've exited on or sold or dissolved. And it's usually pretty apparent. It's usually like an interpersonal thing where those things weren't outlined or addressed. Well, I think there's two reasons, right? There's one, financially, it just makes sense to do so, to just dissolve, close, or sell something. And then there's two, just from a interpersonal relationship standpoint, it can be like a divorce where it's just, this is not working out. We have different goals. We have different visions. There's just too much animosity at a certain capacity. So either one partner has to kind of part ways, or, you figure out how to sell or dissolve the company altogether. So, it's usually it's one of those events from my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any tips you would give to someone on how to go about that? Like,
well, the nice way is like a sale. If it comes to a point where, two partners just can't get along, hopefully you can sell the business, each make some money and walk away shaking hands. But you just see this all the time. People it's like a bad marriage, and businesses struggle because of it. And it's unfortunate. And it really does boil down to communication. It's funny, you hear, like, my wife say that all the time. Oh, it's all about communication. And you laugh, but business is the same way. It's 100% the same way. Making sure that all that stuff is addressed in the beginning is going to be extremely valuable in the long run. Yeah.
It makes me think of the book I'm not sure if you read this one or not, by the E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber, in which he talks about.
I haven't.
Oh, it's a phenomenal book. I highly suggest you read it. He talks a story about a baker who owns a bakery. Okay. He had more time and all these things when he was an employee of a bakery than the owner of the bakery. But what they talked about was outlining all of the roles and responsibilities of each position before even starting the company, and putting together the SOPs, even going so far as to put the SOPs together and for each position and role, and then creating training material for each and every one of those positions, and then deciding ahead of time who in the organization when it's starting is going to do those positions and moving forward, and at what point you're going to offload those other positions to other people, even when it comes down to who's being the boss. Like a two-headed monster is a nightmare. Somebody has to be the boss. I think you would probably agree.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's one of the more challenging things for people starting companies. And I struggle with this for sure, which is you want to do everything because you think you can do everything the best. And you're never going to scale that way. You're just giving yourself a job. And yeah, it's something, it's hard to relinquish control. It's hard to relinquish responsibility. Because everybody thinks they're the best at everything, and it's a human flaw, right? So I mean, you have to do it in order to grow. Something that I've definitely struggled with is hiring people and just like trusting them to do it and walking away.
I think if you put training materials together of what the role is, for instance, a friend of mine told me, "Hey Matt, you should like record what you're doing every 15 minutes when you're working on a project." And then creating an SOP out of that. And every 15 minutes, and then once you've built up 8 hours on a project, let's say it's a website, for instance, getting a website from beginning to end and, demonstrating how you do that. And then, you all of a sudden you have a training for someone and activities of what needs to be done, depending on how deep you want to go or how detailed you want to be with that. Probably easier to do that than just say, hey, design a website.
100%. I think that's a fabulous idea. And I was talking to a friend of mine who owns a very big IT company, and he kind of did that, and that was how he scaled is exactly that. He was like, I started taking tranches of my time, and when I was doing certain tasks, I started recording my activities. He's like, I was doing a screen share. I had a live feed, and I was just kind of like talking to myself, but walking through it for future employees. And he's like, it took me some time to get used to it and to refine it. But he's like, that was once I had that library and that training program together, he was like, that was absolutely the catalyst for my business that allowed them to scale pretty quickly. I mean, it's certainly, I haven't done that thoroughly, but it's something that makes a heck of a lot of sense for sure.
Hey,
and it's, I think the challenging part is, the only challenging part with that, I think, is the creative aspect of it, right? In an agency,
absolutely.
If you're doing the creative aspect, there are some things like when it comes to systematic building a website, doing certain things, you can really make it systematic and training oriented. The creative aspect of it is where I always bang my head against the wall. Is how do we how do we duplicate those processes? And there's way. I mean, there's a whole.
Oh man, that's tough, eh?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. You were saying, how do we do that? Like, I was just thinking, man.
Well, you're
trying to basically clone yourself. You're trying to clone creativity. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah. I mean, you have the not the lean methodology, but the my mind's blanking on it. There was a whole like operational book that was written a while ago about scrums, like doing scrums and stuff like that every morning. And I forget the name of the program that scrums really started from, but that was I think really incorporated around how do we get our creative teams and how do we get large groups to be in sync and kind of all have a similar mentality when it's things that are a little less structured.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Hey, it's been great talking to you. I would love to have you on again. If there's so many other things that you touched on that I would love to talk about, like operations side of things and various other topics that if you'd be willing to come on the show again, I would love to have you.
Yeah, I would love to, Matt. It was a pleasure speaking with you, man.
Yeah. That being said, if people wanted to learn more about you, where would they do that? How could they find out more about you online?
They can check out our website. It's they can search us, the Mcallen Group, and Macallan. So just a little back. So Macallan is spelled Macallan, and it was we named it after my favorite Scotch. So that's where the name comes from. Okay. And you can check out my LinkedIn page, but those are our social media is good. But really, just our website and my LinkedIn page would be the best places.
Are you active on Twitter?
No, I'm not.
No?
I used to be.
Not your thing.
And nah, fell off the map on that.
Yeah. Hey, I just have five quick follow-up questions for you. What is one subject you would like to learn more about?
I'm fascinated by the whole crypto sphere and what's going on with that. It's such a hot button that everybody's talking about, and I know nothing about it really. I haven't really. I know very little. So I want to learn more, and so that way I don't feel like if this does become the future that I get left behind. So I would say the crypto market.
Yeah, I was not a word of a lie. I was just thinking about it this morning before our call.
Yeah.
Because I read something online. I was like, man, what item do you think is worth spending more money on?
What item is worth spending more money on?
More money on, yeah.
I think staff. I think the right people.
Staff, the right people? Yeah. That's a good answer.
For sure.
Yeah, because that's the only way you can grow, really. Who's your favorite Disney character?
Goofy.
Goofy, absolutely. What is your favorite type of food?
I love my favorite dish ever is chicken piccata or veal piccata.
Oh,
I love Italian food. I love just a good pasta dish.
Oh, cool. And what is your favorite season of the year? Winter, spring, summer, or fall?
I would have to. It's tough. I love snowboarding and I love the beach, but I would have to lean towards summer. I'm getting into golf lately, so I've been enjoying getting out on the golf course once it gets nice.
Oh, awesome! That's awesome. Hey, Mike, I want to thank you again for being on the show. I really appreciate it, and you have a wonderful day.
Yeah, Matt. You too. Thanks so much for having me, man.
No problem.
Take care.